it keeps zooming in and out on me. It's very dramatic and strange. Hey, hello, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about both March and April reads, but don't worry, I didn't read all that much for how much I tend to read in the month of April, so it's not going to be that much more than my average monthly read. I think I read 5 in the month of April and 13 in the month of March, so combined, it's about my average monthly read, plus a couple. But also, I'm doing a slightly different format, so if you are ready, buckle in. Ooh, dramatic zoom. Okay. Here we go. All right, so please ignore the fact that I'm using Excel. It is just the most convenient for me. I already track all of my book reading in Excel as well as the notes on my phone. It's neither here nor there. Purple means that I read it during the month of March. Blue means that I read it during the month of April. That doesn't actually have any kind of impact on how I'm going to be doing this. I'm going off of mostly vibes. Okay, so our first 2 books, The Eye of the Bedlam Bride, is by Matt Dinniman. This is installment number 6 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, the series that I have spoken ad nauseum about in my last video, because that's where I read the majority of these books. I really, really enjoyed them. I have taken a pause on book 7. I just am not in the right headspace to enjoy it, but I did very much enjoy book 6. This one is like the Magic the Gathering entry into the series. If you're not familiar with Dungeon Crawler Carl, essentially the concept is aliens are cashing in on a lien, essentially, on the planet. Earth was told that they were supposed to pony up their resources, and they had a set amount of years that they were supposed to do it in. Nobody on Earth actually received that message, as far as we're aware of, but that doesn't matter to these guys. They're basically a corporation, and they're gonna get their pay. When the aliens come to collect, and Earth is obviously unable to do anything about it because they don't know how to talk to them, they take it over, essentially, and they also integrate that into this like long-standing TV series, the Crawl, the Dungeon Crawl, where the given planet, all the resources are harvested, everything that is man-made gets sunken down into the earth, and anything that is natural stays there. If you happen to be inside a man-made thing, then unfortunately you perish. And if you are not inside a man-made thing, when this event happens, then you have the opportunity to go down some set of stairs that magically pop up and join the Crawl. It's very Dungeons and Dragons coded. If you are familiar with that sort of gameplay, everybody goes in. It's very RPG. Everybody goes in, they do essentially a tutorial level, and then they are able to select their class, their race, they're able to train up their skills. There's a whole bunch of stuff. It's very, very fun. It's very much targeting the like gamer crowd and the like traditional RPG gamer crowd and the millennials. The humor is very it's very on point for my generation. So yeah, like I said, book 6 is the Magic the Gathering installment. Each level has its own theme, and that's this one's theme. You have cards, and you have to fight using your cards, your deck, against your opponent's deck, be that a like NPC boss style thing or potentially another player. This book had some of the most poignant emotional scenes, I think, of the series that I had experienced up to this point. And I really enjoyed the ending. It was a little unexpected, which was fun. I think the only thing that I didn't super vibe with was that this is another split the party sort of episode installment. You really don't see a whole lot of the supporting cast in this one. You are mostly seeing Carl and Donut, which is fine. And then, like the other previous installments, you're seeing more and more of like the machinations behind this Crawl and the corporation that runs it and shit. Why does it say John Appleseed at the bottom? Go away. This picture, though, is a picture I took. Okay. Those are gone. The second book in the first round is The Fall of Babel. This is by Josiah Bancroft. This is the fourth and final installment in the Books of Babel series. Also succumbing to the split the party thing. Except unlike Dungeon Crawler Carl, where you really don't see much of the other characters unless they periodically interact with Carl or Donut, you are mostly... like, you are actually following the different sections of the characters as they're going along. It's just you'll spend a huge chunk of time with one character or two characters, and then you'll switch and essentially go back in time, and then spend a bunch of time with the next character, and then switch. And you could just keep doing that ad nauseum until the book ends. I thought that the ending was particularly satisfying. Not necessarily satisfying. I think it opened itself up to the kind of open-endedness that I particularly like in books. However, I did not like... oh gosh, what is his name? The main character? I didn't like the choice that he made. I felt like it was silly. I didn't agree with it. And that being like essentially the penultimate scene. I was just like, seriously? Which is why I gave it a slightly lower rating. But like overall, I was starting to lose interest in the series as I was going, as you'll notice in the previous video where it keeps zooming in and out on me. It's very dramatic and strange. But it was fine. It was fine. It was a good book. It's a fun series. I do recommend it. Steampunk adventure, steampunk fantasy, flintlock fantasy, I guess, but not really. It doesn't have magic in the way that we're all used to seeing, so I still refer to it as like steampunk adventure. But meh. As you can probably guess from how I am talking about these different books, though, I have a pretty clear winner, and my winner is going to be, The Eye of the Bedlam Bride.
It's time to do.
Okay, so the next two books, I read both of those in the month of April. Aether and Bone and Dragon Gods were both advanced reader copies of books that I got to read. Very thankful for that. They're both fantasy. They both involve dragons. I was going through, and I'm still going through, a dragon phase right now when it comes to my fantasy/romantasy. Both of them are marketed as romantasies, and while the romance does play a heavy-ish role in the story, I don't think it is necessarily the A plot in either of these books, which is why I sort of refer to them instead as fantasy. That, for me, is the difference between a fantasy and a romantasy. If the primary driving factor of a plot is the romance, that's a romantasy. If the primary driving factor of the plot is something else, and then there is a romance subplot or B plot, that's just a fantasy with romance. So that's like why I can say The Wheel of Time is just a fantasy and not a romantasy, even though there are several romantic, like large parts of that book. It's not spicy. And these ones get a little spicy, but they're not like, I don't like overly spicy anything, to be totally fair. Okay, so the premise of Aether and Bone, this is by Amber Toro. Premise of Aether and Bone is that you're following Oliviana. She is the daughter of the man who used to be essentially the master engineer, the chief engineer of this community, who was doing something illegal and was therefore executed for it, which is incredibly upsetting. You start the story well after that execution. The main character, Liviana, is an adult now. She is now herself the master technician for the community. She's like in her 20s or something. And that is mostly explained because she was training with her dad, like, as a kid. She had been, like, apprenticing with him since she was a child. So, like, this is not new for her. She's put in the work. She is then given a task to fix the aqueducts in the community, which is itself a little bit sus because her dad is the one who designed them and her dad's like inventions and stuff just never failed. So she doesn't quite understand why she's being put under a microscope, but it's very much a situation where she's being put under some kind of microscope. And she is paired with the leader of the guards, the captain of the guards, Caius, who she used to be really good friends with when she was a kid, and then things happened and they are now basically enemies. So this is a very traditional setup for an enemies to lover situation. Like I said, this is like a romantasy fantasy. There is a pretty heavy romance subplot, but it's still not the primary driver, in my opinion. So they're paired together. And then Oliviana decides that she needs to, like, something is just not right. Something is not right. And she's going to go and she's going to figure out what's going on. And so she decides to leave the community. She escapes essentially out into the outside world, which is like heavily illegal to do, by the way. And Caius naturally follows her, as well as some of her friends. And then you are just following them on their adventure, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. And the big primary reason why she decided that she needed to leave is because the technology, the magic in her underground community is dying, and she wants to figure out why. So that's why she sets out. Yeah, I gave this one a 4. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. The second book is Dragon Gods. This is by Kiersten, Michele. I'm going to say Michele. This one is also a more fantasy than romantasy. This one has even less spice than Aether and Bone, which I personally prefer. I'd like my plot to be the thicker part of my reading. This is another like classic, the oppressed are rising up against their oppressors sort of situation. You're following the main character, whose name I've just forgotten. She is, and is not, but mostly is, associated with the rebel group. And she goes outside the city limits, which is highly illegal for a person of her, like, caste, class, whatever, and gets caught by Fox, who is also the captain of the guard for the city. And he has something stuck in his craw about the rebels, because he believes that the rebels killed his brother, and that's the whole reason why he joined the guards. But he's always had this sort of, like, niggling feeling that's in the back of his head that said that something isn't quite right, but he doesn't really know or really want to engage with why that's happening. Anyway, he goes and he captures her because she's broken the law or whatever. And in the process of taking her back to the city, the tables turn, and then he gets captured in turn. And that, unfortunately, sets off this huge manhunt for him and puts the rebellion at serious danger. This one is fun. I really enjoyed throughout the whole book, there are these like sporadic chapters that have essentially flashbacks for both the two main characters, and so you could see why they're making the decisions that they're making that maybe in the previous chapter you wouldn't have fully understood their motivation for, and it's like, oh no, this thing happened to them, and therefore they now approach situations like this by doing X, Y, or Z. I thought it rounded out the characters really well, but yeah, it's nothing like crazy groundbreaking or anything, but I really enjoyed it, and I really liked that the exposition didn't feel clunky, in my opinion, and that a lot of that had to do with having these interspersed flashback chapters. I enjoyed it a lot, and I am looking forward to book 2, which I have started, but I'm not very far into. That one is that one is the advanced reader book. Sorry, Dragon Gods was not an arc. The second book is the advanced reader copy that I am reading right now and will probably be in the next video. This one is kind of hard for me because they're both they both have some of the same like elements to them. But I think mostly because the slow burn was truly and genuinely pretty slow, which I like. If you're going to tell me that I have a slow burn, I want it to take the majority of the book before we get to the, like, moment, you know? So for that alone, I think Aether and Bone is my winner. Okay, so the next 2 books, these are both books that I read in the month of March. The first one is A Road of Shadows and Crows, which I'll talk about in a review. So go watch that. I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot here. Just know that I enjoyed it a lot. Thought it was a lot of fun. It's like Robin Hood reimagined, kinda, meets Atla, kinda. Also the oppressed rising up against the oppressors. It's a fun trope. I enjoy it. Yeah. Anyway, I gave it 4.75. I liked it a lot. Night and the Moth. This is by Rachel Gillig. This is not an arc. This one's been out for a second. It's a duology, and I didn't realize that the second book isn't out yet. So regrets. Only in that I really want to know what's going on next. You are following essentially a priestess of this really strange church that is like the central essentially, it is the central power of the land of Traum, dream, Teehee, because it deals with dreams a lot. Dreams are important in this one. So the priest or priestess, it's always priestess. These priestesses are visited by various people in power or whatever, and they want to have their like standing with the gods divined, sort of their future divined kinda, but it's a little more nuanced than that. It has to do with how certain symbols or omens are revealed to the priestess when she is dunked into this like magical pool, drowned in this magical pool, and then she dreams these different symbols, and she does this for the new king of the land, and all of them are negative. Every single one is like, you're gonna fail. And that is weird. So they leave kind of disgruntled, and but she cannot stop thinking about this one knight that's a part of the party, who is just so unimpressed with her and the church, and something about that just like makes her kind of intrigued. There's a little bit of an enemies to lovers situation happening here. She goes out one night, like before the whole group leaves, they go out into town, which is illegal. Her and the other priestesses, they're all young women, by the way, like very young women. And sort of realize that something is not quite right with their setup. And then they return and the girls start to disappear. I don't want to get too much further into the meat of the story, but I did really enjoy it. I liked it a lot. The reviews seem to be very one way or the other, like you love it or you hate it. I very much enjoyed it, so I don't know. And I think because of the like depth at which I got to know each of the characters, because it's such a small cast for this one, and the whole concept just felt new and exciting to me. And so for that, I think the winner of this round is going to be the Knight and the Moth. Exciting and new. Okay, the next two books are older books. We've got Black Prism and Red Queen. I read both of those in the month of April. Black Prism is by Brent Weeks. It's flintlock fantasy, so it's magic but with guns. The whole concept of this like continent ruling system, there's several different kingdoms and they all answer to the Prism. The Prism is what they are because they have the ability to control the entire spectrum. Their magic is based off of the spectrum. If you are blessed or whatever, if you have magic, typically you have control over one of the colors, one of the 7 main colors of the spectrum. Oh. And that both influences how you are as a person, because the magic will influence you. Like, say, if you have blue, you tend to be cold and logical, especially whenever you're actively using your magic and creating what's called luxin, which is sort of like a resinous physical manifestation of your magic. If you're green, you tend to be like a bit hedonistic, but at the same time, your emotions start to have more control over you, but they tend to be not necessarily like negative ones. Red tends to be full of rage. Purple, it's like sub-violet is what it's referred to. So purple is so it's unlike blue, which is cold and logical, kinda, they're so far removed from themselves that they're cold and logical and they're more observant, I guess. Anyway, it continues on. The Prism has control of the entire spectrum, and that's incredibly rare. Only one in a generation. And yeah, so you're following Kip and Gavin. Kip is 15 years old. Gavin is like in his 30s. Gavin is the Prism. Kip is this kid from one of the kingdoms that is currently experiencing a satrapy. It's currently undergoing some political turmoil because they are reestablishing themselves as a kingdom rather than a satrapy. And there's something up with him. There's something about him that keeps him particularly interesting, which is why we're following him. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. For the cons, I did see in some of the reviews that, and it just didn't really occur to me, but Brent Weeks does tend to spend a little bit of extra time describing female form more so than the men. It'll be like, beautiful curvaceous body, blah, 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 blah for the woman. And then it'll be like, and then there's some guy. You're like, okay. With the exception of the general, he gets a lot of description. Anyway, I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4.25. Red Queen was also a fun one. This one is more like a young adult fantasy, or romantasy, because the romance does play a pretty large part in this book. But it's not the only primary plot. This one is by Victoria Avayard. This is the one that's currently in the middle of all of that, like, book talk, Instagram, bookstagram, conversations about plagiarism and stuff. Not against Avayard. Her book is being plagiarized, is what is the, like, alleged conversation, or that's what the conversation is about. Allegedly, her book is being plagiarized by another author. I'm not going to get into that. I haven't read the other series. I've seen some of the discourse about it. I find myself inclined to agree with people saying that Avayard has been, like, stolen from, but at the same time, I don't have all the information, so I'm not going to, like, put that out there beyond this just little teeny tiny bit. It is a young adult fantasy, so all of the characters are, like, in their teens, which now makes me feel kind of weird, because I'm not in my teens. If all the characters were aged up by, like, 4 or 5 years, I think I would feel better, because there is, like, a pretty serious romantic subplot, and I keep worrying that it's gonna get spicier than just a stolen kiss. There's a lot of, like, yearning happening, and, like, a love triangle. This is another the oppressed are rising up against the oppressors. You got two types of people. You got silvers, you got reds. The silvers are the ones with magic. The reds are the ones without magic. The silvers are the ones who are the ruling class. The reds are the peasants. The reds are rising up. The reds will rise again. Something about the coming dawn. Anyway, you're following this one girl. She is, I can't remember her name. She's a red. She's from one of the villages. She finds herself in a situation where she is employed essentially by the king and is working like a big gladiator style event, and then chaos ensues and she ends up being sucked in a whole lot further than she ever thought she'd be, and she became a political tool on both sides of the spectrum, which is frustrating for her, but exciting for us as the readers. Like I said, there's a little bit of a, like, love triangle. I do enjoy that you can't really tell who to trust, but at the same time, it did make it kind of frustrating to read. I think that's why I gave it a 4. But I enjoyed it. It was a fun read. However, between the two, I think, especially because I, like, haven't even touched book 2 of the Red Queen, I'm just not the target audience, I guess. I'm just so uncomfortable about their ages. I think, and because I like the magic system in Black Prism more, I think that Black Prism is my winner.
I've got the magic in me. Every time.
The next 2 books, one I read in March, one I read in April. These are both from the making of Mortal Men. Let's Google that, shall we? And by Google, I mean Fable. Let's see. Where is my review? Oh, Gael Song. Why did I call it TMOM too? All right, whatever. This is part of the Gael Song. Era 1, there's 2 eras. Series by Shawna Lawless. This is such a fun series. It's Irish folklore is what it is. Irish fantasy. Fucking love it. Absolutely here for it. Really, really enjoy it. The Children of Gods and Fighting Men, you're following one of Fola of the Tuatha the descendants of the Tuatha, and then Gormla and her son Citric and her brother oh god, Morda, who are of the Fomorians. The Fomorians and the Tuatha have been at each other's throats since basically the beginning of time, minus the very first generation of them existing in Ireland. Get to that later. The Tuatha believe at this point that all of the Fomorians have been wiped out, and so they think that it is time to maybe start feeling out how it is to get back out with the mortals. They had withdrawn themselves from the Mortal Society for about 80 years because they were losing too many of their own to fighting the mortals, like wars between the kingdoms. This is a very violent time in Ireland. This is in the early 1000s, 1100s, somewhere in that realm. And the really fun part about this series is that it was written to take great pains to reflect real actual events with real actual people that are in like historical records, like Brian Boru, and Citrix Oakbeard and all of these other people, but with very, very minor like shifting in the timeline to fit the plot. Obviously, the plot itself is fictional, the magic is fictional, but like the big historical events and who is fighting who and stuff like that, all of that is based off of real actual Irish history, which I found particularly cool. So yeah, I gave that one a 5. I fucking loved it. The Words of Kings and Prophets is the second book in that same series. This one is it's just a continuation. I didn't feel like as much happened in this one. I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, obviously stuff happened, but I wasn't vibing with it. So, yeah, it was still beautifully written. Shawna Lawless's like writing style is just goddamn gorgeous. Really love her prose. It was just very refreshing. But yeah, unfortunately / fortunately, I mean, it's her against her, so she's still gonna win no matter what. But the winner of this one is hands down the Children of Gods and Fighting Men. Okay, the next two are unfortunate to be pitted against each other because they are very wildly different in their genres. The first one is Becoming the Pastor's Wife by Beth, Allison, Barr. This is a nonfiction, like women's history book. You're following, she is doing her research on essentially the Baptist Church like council in the United States and what like defines the role of a pastor's wife and how it has been morphed in modern times to what it is now. It was interesting. I liked it. There were a couple of nitpicks that I have. I don't like when a rhetorical question is asked and then the author's like thought on that rhetorical question is immediately given to me. If you're going to ask me a question, let me come to my own conclusion. But also I don't like being asked rhetorical questions when I'm reading like historical stuff. I don't like that. And then I think that this one also kind of suffers from like a book made of essays written by the same person. So you end up seeing the same quote 4 or 5 times over about 160 pages worth of like actual research. The rest of the book is the notes and bibliography. So about 160 pages of that is like the meat of the book. And to have the exact same passage quoted 4 times with no variation just felt repetitive, and I didn't particularly like that. However, it did open my eyes to some interesting like things that I think I had observed but never like understood or internalized or really thought to think harder about, having grown up in the South. And like, while I'm not particularly religious, I grew up in a religious community. And, you know, some of our like best family friends are very religious. They're not Baptist. But I don't know. Actually, it was interesting. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4. The next one is Gone Girl. This is by Gillian Flynn. This is a thriller. This is, if you've seen the movie, it's this book. I hadn't seen the movie in so dang long, like a really long time, that I kind of forgot everything but the main plot, like final plot twist or whatever. And it still hits you like a truck. It is executed so well. It is a thriller in every definition of the word. You are uncomfortable the entire time. Both of the characters suck. But like almost in a good way. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I was engaged the entire time. I ate it up in very little time. And so, unfortunately for becoming the pastor's wife, but Gone Girl is the clear winner.
Act like you don't bomb in Phantom, Joe!
All right, so the next two are continuation of the Fourth Wing series. I told you I was going to read the rest. Iron Flame and Onyx Storm. Both of these are by Rebecca Yarros. You are still following Violet and Xaden and the gang. The first one, Iron Flame, is still primarily set at the War College, but then something happens and they're not at the War College anymore. You're also like introduced a little bit more to these, like this, the people who were considered to be the antagonists before. It is becoming more and more apparent that they are in fact not actually the antagonists, and it would behoove them all to work together, but you know, old habits die hard. This one had a lot of action. This one had the most infuriating, I want you to tell me absolutely everything. Be completely honest with me. Well, I cannot tell you this thing. I'm not like allowed to tell you this thing. You have to tell me everything. I can't tell you everything. That got really annoying after a while, especially because this is like a military college, and surely by now she should be understanding of the concept of like classification and need to know. And Riorson is a year ahead of her. She's still in school. He's 2 years ahead of her. She's still in school and he's already out in like the military now. Not everything that he knows can be shared. He like hints at shit though, which is annoying. And I feel why she gets annoyed. But also, ma'am. Anyway, Onyx Storm is mostly not set at the War College. This is Violet's third year at the academy. This should be her final year, but shit got weird in the end of the last book, and you're really getting to know this like second group of people by now. You're really starting to get like emotionally attached to them. I think the writing is getting a little bit better. I know that I'm a part of the minority when I say that I like the other books more than I like the very first one. I enjoyed the first one. But I think the writing gets a little bit better as you get along. I will say though, Onyx Storm took me a minute to get into. I don't know why. It took me until about 30% into the book. But once I did get past that slump, your girl was hooked and I couldn't stop reading it. So, I don't know. I enjoyed them both, but my winner is Onyx Storm. Because like I said, I think it was written a little bit better.
Storm's coming, I can see the clouds. No running's gonna...
All right, the next two books, I read them both in March. These are both advanced reader copy books that I got to read. I was very thankful for that. The first one is Shadow Trials. This is by Evelyn Hart. This one is, again, I don't know, romantasy or fantasy. I don't know. I don't know, but I had a lot of fun with it. I really enjoyed this one. This is one of the ones where I like, if I find myself theorizing several times over the course of reading about like what's going to happen next, then that to me is like a good thing. It's a sign that the foreshadowing is doing what it's supposed to do and it's keeping me engaged and interested. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. It is, as the name would imply, Trials. This human girl who's like a monk, but like the actual traditional like fighting kind of monk. Kind of, because women aren't supposed to be monks, but whatever, that's a different story. She is entered essentially into these trials to become one of the Godforged, one of the super powerful beings within this realm, which are, interestingly, the thing that she had been basically learning how to fight her entire life, for reasons. Fiona, the main character, is feisty. She's fun. And one thing that I liked about this, that a lot of romantasy books and fantasy books that are like modern and intended for like my audience or whatever nowadays tend to have the main female character just be like a total badass from the get. And she is a badass from the get, but she doesn't really accomplish the vast majority of the trials entirely on her own. She makes alliances, she makes friends, and that is how she is able to get through what she needs to get through. And I think that kind of makes it like a little bit more distinct. And I enjoyed that a lot. Our main male character is clockable pretty early on, but he got like a lot of really good character development, which I really enjoyed. He could be defined as morally gray, but I don't really think so. I think he just has his own morals and he sticks to them pretty consistently throughout the whole book. So I don't know. Also, there is a twist that just like, what got me. I was hit like a truck. I don't know. I enjoyed it a lot, though. I thought it was a really good book. I'm very thankful I got to read that one. The next book... this one's almost unfair. So the next one is Of Wind and Fate. This is by Robyn Abbott. This is like Norse fantasy. It's also an advanced reader copy. That one comes out near the end of May. This... Robyn Abbott's prose is just undeniably gorgeous. It is so descriptive, but not in a heavy-handed way. She really captures emotions really well, and she really, really captures the like fear and frustration that comes with being forced into a new environment. And this is just me being a nerd, but like all of the frustration that you feel whenever you're learning a new language and you're in the place where that language is spoken already, and you're like 59 steps behind, and you just start coming up with like really silly connections in your head to try and understand what it is the people around you are saying. And it works in the end, but it's still, it's weird and frustrating and very, very fun. She captures that so very well. You're following Mira, who is telling the story herself after the events of this story. She's like telling you about it because she wants to clear the record. She clearly has gone down in the like archives in history as something other than what she wants to be represented as. So she's trying to correct that by telling her side of the story. So periodically you'll get these little like almost fourth wall breaking moments, but it's still Mira. She's just like explaining something or like telling you that she's going to kind of skip forward because that part's not important, but this next part is, as you would experience if you were talking to a narrator, like a person who's telling you their story. It's not jarring. It's not like, it doesn't take you out of it at all because the voice and the vibes are still there because the whole thing is being told by Mira, right? This one I think might fall a little bit more into the romantasy genre just because the relationship is a pretty central role in this. Mira is a what is she? She's a gold keeper from Isla, and she gets kidnapped, she gets stolen by the Northern and taken back to their land. Very Viking raidy. And she is just trying to adapt to her new surroundings, her new experience, and the majority of the time is spent watching her just grow and become a part of this community and figure out where she stands in the society. But in the meantime, she meets Fel, who is a very important like warrior in this community, and the king, Eric, who happens to also speak Eilish, and becomes sort of like a mentor figure to her. And there's a twist that happens, and it is devastating. There is a like ongoing joke for people who've read this book called I Survived Chapter 49. And I survived Chapter 49. It was a lot. But it was really, really good. I really, really enjoyed it. I loved every second of reading this one. I ate it up in like 2 sessions, and it's only because I had to go to sleep. I loved it. I loved every second of it. And unfortunately, as much as I loved Shadow Trials of Wind and Fate, has lived in my head rent-free since I read it. So that one is definitely the winner. Okay, the last 2 are James by Percival Everett, historical fiction. This one is the essentially reimagining of Huck Finn, but from the perspective of James.
Jimothy.
So the slave that is a part of that story. If you are unfamiliar with that, it is set in the United States back when slavery was still a thing, which is unfortunately not that long ago. But James finds himself in a bit of a predicament. He is essentially framed for something and needs to get his ass out. He has to leave. And yeah, it is really, really beautifully written. It's very poignant. There's a lot of really good discussion about like the sense of self and the projection of that self, and how important it was to like mask and code switch for the sake of survival, and how heartbreaking it is that that was even a requirement to begin with. Honestly, I think this is one of those like instant classics, and I do very much think this is a book that everyone should read. I really, really, really enjoyed it. Like, it's got so many good conversations can come out of reading this book. And then on top of that, in like a literary sense, I think it's honestly kind of a masterpiece. So I really enjoyed that one. The next one is Sword Heart. This one's by T. Kingfisher. This is a like cozy fantasy, cozy romantasy. I think the romance plays a pretty decent role in this one, but I don't think that was the intention. Like all T. Kingfisher books, the main female character is an older heroine in that she is in her 30s rather than like in her teens. And she has recently she's recently like inherited her weird uncle's estate, her very wealthy weird uncle's estate, and all of a sudden her family, his family, has swooped down and they want it, and they lock her into a room, and every single room is just filled to the brim with stuff because her uncle was essentially a hoarder. And she pulls this sword off of the wall with the intention of just ending herself. She pulls the sword off of the wall, and when she unsheaths it, plop, out comes a man whose soul has been tied to the sword. Obviously, he doesn't want her to kill herself. So they escape, and then they try to go and find essentially legal reasons to get the family out and to regain control of the house, which is sort of a funny concept. They go to the Temple of the Rat to go and find a lawyer, essentially. But this temple is several cities away, or at least a city away, and this is set in fantasy land, so you have to ride a carriage, and it takes days to get there and whatever. And things happen, shenanigans ensue, and there's romance, and it's just fun. It's cozy. I enjoyed it. It's kind of grisly for a cozy read, but I think ultimately it's still very cozy. I liked it a lot. However, unfortunately, it's pitted up against James, which, like I said, I honestly think is like an instant classic. So, So now we'll be a little bit faster. What am I clicking on? Okay. The idea of Bedlam Bride versus Aether and Bone. I really enjoyed the idea of Bedlam Bride. Don't get me wrong. But I think because I'm getting a little burnt out on this series, I think Aether and Bone is my winner for this one. And then between Night and the Moth and Black Prism, I think that the Night and the Moth is going to be my winner. Between the Children of Gods and Fighting Men and Gone Girl, honestly, just because I'm such a fantasy nut, the Children of God and Fighting Men is very much my win, and it's one of my favorite series that I've read so far, like up to this point in this year. Then between Onyx Storm and Of Wind and Fate, sorry to Rebecca Yarros, but Of Wind and Fate is absolutely the winner for me in this one. And then because this is a weird and uneven distribution, I'm going to have to do James versus Aether and Bone. And honestly, I'm sorry, but James is going to have to win this one. Okay, and then between James and Night and the Moth, James is absolutely the winner here. And then between the Children of Gods and Fighting Men and Of Wind and Fate, this one's like really genuinely very hard for me, and man, I hate it. I kind of wish that these were the last two, that I was like in the third round, like I would rather those two be the ones that I'm comparing. God, I love Of Wind and Fate. I really, really love it. Okay, I'm gonna go almost exclusively off the fact that there's more than one book, which is so unfair. But also just, I haven't read a whole lot of Irish fantasy in general, and that could just be a failing of me, but having it be so historically accurate at the same time is so fun. So I'm just, yeah, the Children of Gods and Fighting Men is very much my winner. Okay, and then to our final round between James and the Children of God and Fighting Men. James is very much an instant classic, and I do think that everybody should read it. I think that everybody who likes larger scale, like political intrigue and Irish mythology and Irish folklore and historical fantasy should absolutely read The Children of Gods and Fighting Men. Both of these are historical fantasy, which I think is kind of fun. But I think I'm always going to end up reaching for a fantasy book before I reach for a regular historical fantasy or historical book. A historical fiction book. I'll reach for historical books all the time. That's my degree. But yeah. I'm sorry to James, but The Children of God and Fighting Men is my overall winner. Congratulations, Shawna Lawless. You are the winner. Wow. Okay. That was fun for me. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you like this kind of format, it's sort of like March Madness style bracket game, then let me know in the comments. If you hated it, let me know that too, and I won't do it again. If you like this kind of video, please don't forget to drop a like and consider subscribing. I try to do monthly book reviews of my reads, as well as whatever the heck I feel like talking about. Sometimes I may talk about a specific book on its own. Sometimes I might talk about history, like video essays. So if you're interested in any of that, join the family. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you all have a good one. I will see you all in the next one. Bye.